Okay, we've got the kids tucked in. It's time for the WPIAL Blitz Show. Ian McMeans, I'm Bruce Badgley, and I tell you what, I was getting, we had a little chat going on with the guys while we were waiting for it to get on here, and I was going to put out there the fact that I always felt that the last week of the regular season was the best week of the football season in general because so many teams are still wanting to get in and the field finally hasn't been set. What are your thoughts there, Ian?
It is a lot of things. Just really come to a semi conclusion, right? That this is kind of the first conclusion of the season. That you get these points in the season where every week of the playoffs teams get knocked out, but like the end of the regular season is one of these big watershed moments of the year where you have okay. Now we've separated out the wheat from the chaff. These are our playoff teams. These are the teams that are out. These are the teams that are going to contend for titles. And then you get the WPIAL championships that happen over 2 weekends because you get 6A and 4A happening one weekend and then 5A, 3A, 2A, 1A the following weekend. It used to just be all one weekend when all the WPIAL championships happened, and then you went into the state playoffs. So there used to be kind of these three moments of like the regular season ends, the WPIAL championships happen, and then the state championships happen. Now it's a little more distorted because of how the state playoffs all work. But this is a big moment in the season. And for some kids, some teams, some kids, this will be the last time they ever play football, right? That, some kids, high school seniors that are graduating, their teams might not make the playoffs. This is going to be their last games. This is the last chance they have to go out there with their teammates, put it all on the line, and really just go out and enjoy it, right? And enjoy the experience one last
Mm-hmm.
time that,
Yeah.
these
And it's
players,
beyond the kids, it's the fans and the schools
yeah,
and
yeah,
communities.
these players have put so much hard work and effort and everything else in and time, not just this year, but throughout their whole careers that just go out and enjoy it one last time. So yeah, it's really a special moment kind of for everyone. A lot of schools have already had their senior nights because only half the schools are going to play at home this week, but
Mm-hmm.
just go out and enjoy the experience and have a blast on if it is your last time playing football, even if it's just your last time for this year, if you're an underclassman or whatever it is, just enjoy it.
And I want to talk a little bit about something that I saw actually breaking from our buddies over at WPIAL Insider. I want to give those guys credit a couple hours ago that I saw on Twitter. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. And I'd really like to get some of the opinion of our viewers on this too, where WPIL put out on Twitter that the WPIL has decided not to allow playoff games to air on television. Now, isn't it pretty late to notify people when they're going into the final week of the regular season, number one? I'm going to do this in stages here because
Yeah.
what do you think about that? Like all of a sudden, the regular season's about to end, and then you're saying, "Oh, by the way, we're not going to like show them on TV now."
Yeah, I so this is the WPIAL has been moving towards more control by the NFHS network um, over time. So starting when we started this show in 2020, um, and one of the reasons we started this show was because fans couldn't go to the games. So we wanted to have a show that would talk about what was happening and be able to relay information back to fans of high school football and just spread the word about all the good things that were happening, right? But a lot of teams at that time started taking it on themselves to try and put their product out there for their fans. A lot of
Sure.
teams started YouTube channels. They started streaming games, whether it was on their school website or somewhere else.
Or throwing those
Um,
stupid AI tunnel things out there that you can't tell
right,
who's even out there.
right. And then a couple years ago, the WPIAL signed an agreement with the NFHS network that they had the exclusive video streaming rights to all playoff games except for the championships. And I
Right.
know there's a similar deal with statewide with the PIAA because
Mm-hmm.
the PIAA championships used to just be on regular streaming or like regular tele. It was on the
Yeah, it's a little convoluted. And look, I know what you're talking about because
yeah,
I'm an NFHS affiliate.
right.
So I broadcast for NFHS as well. I mean, I understand all the rules of engagement as they are, but
But I
uh,
I do think it's a shame that, you know, especially in the playoffs, which is like your showcase games and your showcase events, and especially your championships that are your showcase events for your whole sport, if there's not an easy way to watch it, right? Because not everyone's going to be able to go to the games, right? You've got alumni spread throughout the country. Like the Pittsburgh diaspora is a well-known national phenomenon. That's why the Steelers have such great crowds everywhere they go. So it's a shame that they're not able to show them on TV, that you're going to have to I'm assuming they're going to have to stream them through NFHSs. I'm guessing what it is, but it just seems like more and more controls being given over to this paid streaming service rather than letting schools do it themselves, or letting, and the thing too is that, like, through NFHS, which I know is a national platform and all that, but they had a local affiliate through the Trib Live High School Sports Network, through KDKA, through what used to be Root Sports, Fox Sports
yeah.
Pittsburgh. Now it's, there was a bunch of different iterations of that TV channel, but there were local partners that were doing this and promoting the game of high school football. And now it seems like, in favor of the NFHS more national brand, they're giving up some of the local the local coverage that they had. And I just think it's a shame. Like, these are events that should be on TV. Like, in bigger picture too, like, I hate that there are professional sports championships decided on cable. I've always felt that
Well,
professional
just
sports
look at the NFL
championships,
now. I mean,
yeah, but professional
crazy.
sports championships, whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's the World Series, whether it's the Stanley Cup, the NBA Finals, whatever
Well,
it is, they
Christmas
should,
night.
yeah,
Wasn't it like Christmas night or Thanksgiving night? It was only on like Amazon Prime or something like that. I
yeah,
mean, just crazy.
yeah. Like those games should be on regular broadcast television. They shouldn't be on cable.
Yeah. Well, look, uh I just want to ask that. And I think you answered my next question was, then if they're not on TV, they'll be on NFHS. It's not like they're
I'm
not putting them out there,
I'm
but that is not
assuming
specified in the tweet that I saw.
No, I'm just assuming that. I'm not sure, but I know that, like, that's the agreement for the playoffs, is that if you want to stream, you have to stream through NFHS. So I'm kind of assuming that. I haven't heard that formally, but I'll see if I can get more information on it. Like we said, that was a breaking news story on Monday evening, while Ian was struggling to put his many children to bed. So,
Yeah. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Well, just like I said, breaking news. I wanted to get opinions on that, and I was hoping to see what all of our other friends wanted to say about TV and everything like that. So I throw that out there early. So let's get started.
Yes, we have a lot to cover
A lot
tonight.
to cover,
Yes.
and it's cold out here tonight.
Well, I hope you're bundled up, because we're going to
I
be
am
here for
bundled
a
up out
while.
on the deck. Yes, we are.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us for this week's edition of the WPIAL Blitz show. You've obviously found us on YouTube. You can follow us on social media. Been using the Facebook page a little bit more, so you can interact with us there as well. And check out my WPIAL Games of the Week articles, my WPIAL standings page on SteelCityBlitz.com, and my very popular WPIAL playoff clinching scenarios article, which runs through everything that needs to happen this week for various teams to lock up playoff spots. So if you have a team that's in the playoff hunt, we'll talk about it tonight, but you can also go read about it. I tried to make it as simple as possible, but there'll also be a ton of information on tonight's show. So let's get rolling. First, we'll talk about what happened in week 8. Our biggest wins of the week. The biggest one was certainly a big one. Pine Richland just throttling North Allegheny in a game where Pine Richland outgained North Allegheny by a total of 451 to 32. North Allegheny only made it past midfield once. Now, I'll say a few things about this game. North Allegheny had a couple guys, including their leading rusher, who were injured. They didn't play them because this game didn't matter, right?
Didn't mean anything.
it was a 5A team against a 6A team. Did not matter for playoff qualification. Um, this
It
is a
was a beauty
rivalry.
contest, basically.
Yes, this is a rivalry game. Um, there were, Pine Richland did not take their foot off the gas. They played their starters into the second half. Pine Richland got a number of turnovers that set them up with short fields, but I think the rivalry game aspect has a lot to do with it also. That this was one of the biggest losses in North Allegheny's history. Um, but there were assistant coaches on Pine Richland's team that were members of Central Catholic staff dating back like 15 years, like to 2010. I heard about this after the game. Um, and they were mad about They thought they had a team back then capable of going and winning the state title. North Allegheny beat Central Catholic in the WPIAL championship that year, went on to win the state title. They One of the assistant coaches actually said after the game, like, I feel a little better about 2010 now. Like, it's 15 years later, and they remembered that. And, rivalries run deep in Western Pennsylvania. People do not forget things. So Pine Richland definitely ran it up on North Allegheny. They did not take their foot off the gas.
Wow.
And yeah, so, but I think this does raise some questions, which we'll talk about later in the show.
Okay.
And I know there were definitely some reverberations out east too, because Bob Long texted me and was like,
Was that
"What's
right?
up with
Yeah.
this Pine Richland score?"
I know, right. I
So that
know.
was that was definitely one that was heard round the state.
Yeah, that's right. That was the
And
say what game. What I call
yes,
the say what game.
yep. And then Aliquippa Montour. This game was 7-0 Aliquippa at halftime, and then Montour just laid it on in the second half. Got a blocked punt return for a touchdown, and just took it to Aliquippa, which raises some really big questions in the 4A playoff race, which we will also talk about later. And then in the 1A Big Seven conference, Laurel just throttling Southside Beaver was
Wow.
also a big win because that sets them up for a chance to win the conference title this week against Neshannock.
Absolutely right. Laurel, I mean, maybe the team of the year coming from, Bolivian with Mike Tyson. I mean,
Yeah, they were definitely flying under the radar this year coming in, and now they've got a shot at a top three seed in 1A. So,
how
and they
about
beat
that?
some 2A schools too. That's a very good Laurel team. So our games of the week, I should say, Norwin and Cannon McMillan in a big 6A battle. Norwin edged it out on a last-second field goal, put together a game-winning drive in the closing minutes to win that one. Moon and Upper St. Clair went to double overtime. Moon scored first in double overtime and then picked off a pass on the first play of Upper St. Clair's possession to win the game. And then Chartiers Houston, another team that came out of nowhere. I mean, they were a bottom dweller in their conference the last couple years. Now beating Cornell, clinching a playoff spot. Chartiers Houston won that on the last play of the game. So congratulations to the Bucks as well on wrapping up a playoff spot. A couple upsets which shook up a couple playoff pictures. North Hills topping Penn Hills was a bit of an eye opener after North Hills had gone down to Shaler a few weeks ago. And then Derry beating Mount Pleasant, a couple weeks ago when we were talking about that 3A interstate conference, it seemed like, oh, well, the top three are all 2-0, the bottom three are all 0-2. We've got a clear divide here. But now Mount Pleasant's lost two in a row and Derry's won two in a row, including a win over Mount Pleasant. All of a sudden, Derry's in playoff position. So it goes to show how quickly things can change, even when pictures look pretty clear. Sometimes they're not. Some other noteworthy results: Mount Lebanon beating Hempfield. This is noteworthy because even though it was only Mount Lebanon's second win of the year, it put them in position to potentially qualify for the playoffs if they beat Norwin this week. Thomas Jefferson throttling Chartiers Valley, a big win that TJ needed to lock up a playoff spot for the 31st straight season. And then in a battle atop that same 3A interstate conference, Elizabeth Forward knocking off undefeated Southmoreland 42-0 in very convincing fashion to secure the top spot in that conference. So a lot of big
Yeah,
games and a lot more coming this week.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly some surprises out there, and but it always seems to come down to the final couple weeks of the season, and then we say, wow, where were they all year? Well, they were there in plain sight. We just didn't notice them.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the cool thing about these last couple weeks of the regular season is you start to see teams that, maybe had a tougher schedule early in the year that you weren't paying as much attention to. Now all of a sudden they're right in the mix because other teams above them had started losing and kind of backed up into them. So this is a very, fascinating time of year as all these playoff scenarios start to come together.
Sure, sure.
So our WPIAL Blitz Player of the Week in a 6 touchdown performance, quarterback Gabe Jenkins from Amani Christian. Early in the season, he was doing a lot of running. They were just doing a direct snap and let's let the kid run. This week, he did it with his arm in their win over Burrell. 258 passing yards and 5 touchdowns through the air, plus 132 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. So 6 total touchdowns. A 390-yard performance from Gabe Jenkins, who was a Penn State commit but decommitted, and is now open in his recruitment. But putting together a big performance as he's definitely got the eye of some high-level college coaches. I believe he was a commit as a safety, so he's out there and available for college coaches now that he decommitted from Penn State.
One of the things that we've seen since obviously James Franklin's removal is, we really got to look and see like all these great players that were going to go into Penn State. Now it's this feeding frenzy. I mean, of all these, Division I programs and the smart ones that, stayed in communications with these guys, are going to have a real opportunity to kind of cash in on their recruiting that they weren't expecting.
Yes, definitely. And speaking of some other top players, some other big performances this week, Luca Neal, the slot back from Avonworth, put together a 350 plus yard performance in their win over North Catholic with 223 on the ground, 139 receiving. Tyler Eber, the monster running back from Thomas Jefferson, had over 40 carries, 334 yards, and 4 touchdowns. David Dennison, a 4 touchdown performance for Bethel Park. I didn't mention this in the games of the week, but Leechburg and Brentwood were in an absolute shootout, and it was really like two players just going back and forth. Leechburg's running back, Tim Andersey, had 348 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Brentwood's quarterback, Cedric Davis Jr., two 287 through the air and 4 touchdowns, plus 137 and a touchdown on the ground. Like just an incredible
Just
back and forth
incredible.
performance. Yeah, just two kids, neither one wanting to give up and doing everything they can to help their team win. Leechburg won that game 48-41, but just in a shootout, just back and forth and back and forth. And then we had two kids score multiple non-offensive touchdowns. Nick Ponko from Penn Trafford had 2 pick-sixes in their game, and Jonathan Wiga from Seton LaSalle returned a blocked punt for a touchdown and a kickoff for a touchdown, as well as having a receiving touchdown. So, I love those kind of weird stats. So I have to throw the shout outs to those guys in as well.
That is really amazing numbers. And I like the block punt return touchdown, the receiving touchdown, kickoff return touchdown, multiple touchdowns from not necessarily the standard way.
Yes. Yeah, because it's when you say 5 rushing touchdowns, right? Like you can see that number and be like, okay, they really dominated the line of scrimmage. But when you score touchdowns in multiple ways, and even like 2 pick-sixes, like what are the getting 2 interceptions in one game for a team is hard. Getting 2 pick-sixes for a team is hard. For one player to do it, like that's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So our streak watch, you will notice I did consolidate some things this week because we only had 6 teams that were undefeated heading into week 8. So of those 6, 5 of them won. Southmoreland lost to Elizabeth Forward, which I mentioned earlier. And on the losing streak side, we had 7 teams with active losing streaks coming into this week. Rochester gets off the schneid with a win over Northgate. So congratulations to Rochester ending a 10-game losing streak and getting back on the right side of things with their first win of the season.
All right.
Okay. And as far as conference games go, not a lot changed on the winning and losing streak side of the conference games. Fort Cherry did play a non-conference game, so Clairton's now pulled into a tie with them for the longest active conference winning streak, but not much overall to discuss here because no real changes on that side. So let's get into the meat of the show.
You mean
Talking
the
about the
meat? We haven't hit the meat yet. We've
oh
only
no,
just scratched the surface.
that was just the appetizer. If this was
Oh,
like a 5-course Italian meal, that would have been the pasta dish. Now we're getting
okay.
into the good stuff here.
All right.
So, uh, playoff qualifications in 6A, the top 4 teams make the playoffs. In 5A, 3A, 2A, and 1A, the top 3 from each conference plus a few wild cards make the playoffs. In 4A, because the 4A champion enters the state playoffs a week earlier, only 8 teams make the playoffs, which means only the top 2 from each conference will make the playoffs, plus only 2 wild cards. So 4A, very limited playoff field. So just as a reminder, if this is your first time watching the show, or if
Which
you
we
haven't,
hope. I mean, we want new viewers.
yes, if you haven't heard it before, the WPIAL standings in each conference are based on conference record first, and then head-to-head results, and then Gardner points, which is a strength of victory metric. So you get 10 Gardner points for each conference victory the teams you beat in conference play have. And then the WPIAL tiebreaker points, which is a margin of victory metric. So if you win a conference game by 7, you get +7. Your opponent gets -7. If you win by 10 or more, you just get up to 10. So if you win by 50, it's the same as winning by 11. You just get +10 or -10. So I had to explain that to someone on Facebook today that was asking some questions about it. And it's very easy to conflate these two, right? They were asking about they were saying, how do we get +10 Gardner points? I was like, no, you're talking about the WPIAL tiebreaker points. They're 2 different tiebreakers, but nevertheless, Gardner points, strength of victory, tiebreaker points, margin of victory. That's the important thing to remember. And that will
Okay.
come into play in a few scenarios here as we go through.
People just need to screenshot that slide.
Yes. Or just read the articles that I post on
Yeah,
steelcityblitz.com because I, run through
it's
them all. And
all
that's
spelled out.
Yep, and my standings page there has all these These is basically screenshots of my standings page. That I have. We have the only WPIAL standings page on the internet that has all the tiebreakers listed there for you. So that's why I started this to begin with back in like the 2010s, because nobody had a standings page with all the tiebreakers, and I was tired of calculating them all. So I made my own. At any rate, let's start in 6A. So Central Catholic's locked up the conference title. North Allegheny will be in second place. Norwin beat Canon Mac last week, so Norwin's in third. Canon Mac's currently in fourth with a head-to-head win over Mount Lebanon. Mount Lebanon's in fifth. Now, Mount Lebanon plays Norwin this week, and the winner is in. So Mount Lebanon versus Norwin, a good old-fashioned casket match, to use a 90s wrestling term. Winner's in, loser's out. Probably. Winner is in, though. Because, well, here's the thing, though, right? Because
you just throw these winners in. Probably
the winner is in. The Norwin Mount Lebanon winner is in. Yes. Canon Mac, if they can somehow upset Central Catholic, gets into the playoffs. Canon Mac also gets in if Mount Lebanon loses because they have a head-to-head victory over Mount Lebanon. And
I'm
Seneca
guessing
Valley.
Hempfield's then just out.
Hempfield and Seneca Valley are both out. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Hempfield and Seneca Valley are out because even if Cannonback, Mount Lebanon, and Seneca Valley, even if Cannonback and Mount Lebanon both lose and Seneca Valley wins, and all 3 are tied at 2 and 4, both Cannonback and Mount Lebanon beat Seneca Valley, and Cannonback beat Mount Lebanon. So you wouldn't even get into the Gardner or the WPIAL tiebreaker points. It would just be the head-to-head, which gets back to head-to-head is the first tiebreaker. So Cannonback's win over Mount Lebanon and Seneca Valley would put them in a 3-way tie there. So Seneca Valley's out. Mount Lebanon's only in if they beat Norwin. Norwin is in if Canon-Mac loses. So if Canon-Mac loses to Central Catholic, which is extremely likely, then Norwin's in. And if Mount Lebanon beats Norwin, they're in. If Mount Lebanon loses to Norwin, then Canon-Mac gets back in, after losing to Central Catholic. So the
Wow.
simplest way to put it is Canumack is in with either a win or a Mount Lebanon loss. Norwin's in if Canumack loses. The Norwin Mount Lebanon winner is in. So yes, but I
Well,
think there's something important there. There's something important we need to talk about here because it's something we've talked about a lot this year. You've asked me all year, where is the drama in 6A?
yeah.
Right? You've said it seems like Central Catholic and North Allegheny are just on this collision course once again to meet in the championship game for the fourth straight season. Where's the drama in 6A? Well, there's blood in the water. I think
Oh,
I think the question is North Allegheny vulnerable, right? So the drama in 6A is going to be North Allegheny's first round playoff game. Can North Allegheny get back to the championship game or are they vulnerable? Central Catholic's the best team here, right? Central Catholic's going to walk through this, right? Central Catholic is head and shoulders better than everybody else. But the drama in 6A now becomes is North Allegheny in that 2 spot vulnerable and who gets that number 3 seed? So looking at these results, right? Yes, North Allegheny is 7-2, but they had a very close win against a 5A Woodland Hills team where Scoop Smith got tackled on the 5-yard line at the end of the game and almost scored a game-winning touchdown for Woodland Hills. In conference play, they blew out Hempfield, but they only beat Norwin by 3. They lost handily to Central Catholic. They only beat Mount Lebanon by 9, and they only beat Canumack by 5. So these results, like looking at these results, North Allegheny's played a bunch of close conference games already this year, and then they just got annihilated by Pine Richland. So are they vulnerable? To me, this is the drama in 6A now, right? What team gets that number 3 seed and gets to play North Allegheny in the first round? And see, are they vulnerable, right? Could Norwin, who hasn't made the playoffs in 9 years, if they beat Mount Lebanon and get the number 3 seed, right? Could Norwin like potentially have a shot at North Allegheny? They only lost to them by 3 earlier this year. And 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 Norwin controlled most of that game until a late fumble kind of turned things around and North Allegheny went down and scored. So this is what I'm looking at here, right? Norwin has never played in a WPIAL championship game. Could Norwin knock off North Allegheny in the semifinals and potentially make it to a championship game for the first time ever? Like, what a great story that would be.
well, it would be a great story, clearly. Uh, uh, and so there's the drama. I'm just going to leave it at that. That the drama is whether or not North Allegheny is gonna, is going to be the team playing Pittsburgh Central Catholic for the Whippy for the 6A championship.
Yeah, and I think it's a great storyline because all year we just assumed these two were going to rematch, and I'll say we kind of overlooked some of North Allegheny's close results, right? But
Well,
now when you start to look at it in the big picture that you can look at in week 9 of the season and say, "Whoa, wait a minute here!" Like, some,
so
they've
rather than two prohibitive favorites, we only have one,
yes,
basically. So
yes,
okay, all right, I
yeah.
buy that.
But hey, like that opens up the door, right? Norwin's never made a WPIAL championship game before. Cannon McMillan, I'm not sure if they've ever. I know Cannonsburg won a WPIAL title back before they merged, but I don't know if Cannon McMillan has ever uh, actually made a WPIAL championship game or not. Um, I can look quickly here at my spreadsheet, but
Database.
I don't believe they have. So no, they have not. Like so Cannon like so whoever potentially gets the number 3 seed here is gonna get a favorable draw.
Yeah, I mean, let's hope that that's the drama. The drama is that maybe we have a team who's never gotten there playing for the championship. So
Yeah. Which in and of itself would be a very cool storyline.
yeah, very cool, very cool. All right.
All right, on to 5A, where Peters Township has wrapped up the conference title in the Allegheny Six Conference, and Moon, with their win over Upper St. Clair last week, wrapped
Wow.
up second place. Now, thinking back to our preseason show when I said don't sleep on Moon, this is a good Moon team that is gonna be able to make some noise this year. And that Moon played Peters Township very tight a few weeks back, just knocked off Upper St. Clair in overtime. So the third guaranteed playoff spot here is pretty much going to go to Upper St. Clair. I mean, there's no way Baldwin can
There's
beat
no
them.
way Baldwin's going to beat
No.
him.
So
So,
Upper St. Clair's in with a win, or if Bethel Park loses to Peters Township, which is also pretty likely. But I think this conference is going to get 5 teams into the playoffs. I think you're definitely going to see Bethel and
really?
South Fayette get 2 of the wild cards. Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So remember, top 3 get guaranteed
I
spots.
I
Plus,
just
there's 3 wild cards.
Yeah, I know. I just don't see that there's 5 coming from the Allegheny Six.
There is. We'll trust me on this one.
All right.
All
Okay.
right. So the Big East Conference, where remember top 3 make it plus wild cards. So Woodland Hills has locked up the conference title. Penn Trafford has locked up second place in a playoff spot. So for the third guaranteed playoff spot, Gateway plays a non-conference game this week against Hempfield. So they're stuck at that 3-3 record. Kiski plays Woodland Hills, who's on top of the conference. So most likely Kiski loses, but if Kiski were to win, they would get that last spot. If,
Yeah.
however, if Armstrong beats Franklin Regional, which puts Kiski, Gateway, and Armstrong into a 3-way tie, Kiski would get the spot because they have head-to-head wins over both Gateway and Armstrong. So Kiski's in with an Armstrong win, regardless of what they do. Gateway would need losses by both Kiski and Armstrong. So Gateway needs Franklin Regional, who's 1-8 overall, to knock off Armstrong in order to get into the playoffs, basically.
Yeah, I mean, now there's some drama for you. I mean, that's some kind of realistic drama.
True, true. Now, Gateway and Armstrong may have a shot at a wild card spot also, depending on who finishes fourth. Now, the other thing I'll say though, this is the wild thing, right? Gateway really needs Armstrong to lose because not only could it get them a guaranteed playoff spot, but if Armstrong wins, Armstrong beat Gateway head to head, so Armstrong would hop Gateway for the 4th spot in the conference if they win also.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a deep dive, baby.
Yes. And then finally in the Northeast Conference, this one is very complicated because North Hills beat Penn Hills last week. So Shaler beat North Hills earlier this year. Penn Hills beat Shaler, but then North Hills beat Penn Hills. So we have a potential for a 3-way tie here. North Hills plays a non-conference game, so they're sitting at 3-2 overall. Shaler plays Pine Richland, so most likely Shaler will lose. If Shaler were to somehow beat Pine Richland, which is extremely unlikely, but I still have to say that it's a scenario that exists. If they were to somehow beat Pine Richland, they would actually be conference champions. But that is an extremely unlikely scenario. So
How can that be? Well, obviously it's head to head.
yeah, because
Is the lone tiebreaker?
Yeah,
Sure.
Shaler and Pine Richland would both be 4-1 in conference play, and Shaler would have the head-to-head over Pine Richland. So
Yeah.
as
Okay.
as it is an extremely unlikely scenario, but I still have to mention it. So North Hills is in if Penn Hills loses. But then if Shaler loses to Pine Richland and Penn Hills beats Plum, all 3 of those teams, Shaler, North Hills, Penn Hills, are 3-2 overall. They split their head-to-heads. They'd have the same number of Gardner points. So then it comes down to the WPIAL tiebreaker points, which is the margin of victory metric that we talked about. So since North Hills plays a non-conference game, they're stuck on that +8 number. Shaler losing would drop their number down from 10. So if Shaler loses by more than 3, they'll drop below North Hills. So, because they drop to 7 or less. Shaler loses by 10 plus, they drop all the way down to 0. So in that instance, if Shaler loses by more than 3, then North Hills would win the 3-way tiebreaker, or Penn Hills could if they win by more than 8. So North Hills or Penn Hills would win that 3-way tiebreaker. Um, in which case, then the last guaranteed playoff spot would come down to head to head. So um, Penn Hill's path forward here is actually pretty easy. They just need Shaler to lose by 3 or more, and they need to beat Plum, period. Because even if they beat Plum by 1 point, the WPIAL tiebreaker points put North Hills in second place, and then Penn Hills beat Shaler head to head because it reverts back to head whenever possible. So Penn Hills would get the last guaranteed playoff spot. If Penn Hills were to win, so Shaler, if you're a Shaler fan listening, what you actually want, because you're, no offense, probably going to lose to Pine Richland. If what you want actually is for Penn Hills to either lose to Plum or to crush Plum. If Penn Hills wins by 9 or more, then Penn Hills gets the number 2 spot, and Shaler beat North Hills head to head, so then Shaler would get the number 3 spot. Now, the other crazy thing I'm just going to throw in here is while Plum cannot get a guaranteed playoff spot, they are sitting at 4 and 5 overall, and Plum has non-conference victories over Kiski, who's in 3rd place in the Big East, and Gateway, who's currently in 4th place in the Big East. So if Plum were to beat Penn Hills, Plum has a very good case at 5 and 5 overall, plus 2 wins against fellow wild card contenders from the Big East to actually get that last wild card spot. So Plum, while they can't get a guaranteed spot, could play themselves into a wild card if they can beat Penn Hills this week.
That's another deep dive and that, but one with some merit. I mean, when you consider, the wins that they have, it just comes down to the human factor then.
Yep. So let's look at the big picture overall here, right? So top 3 from each conference are guaranteed spots. Peters Township, Woodland Hills, Pine Richland, I can pretty much assume is going to beat Shaler, are going to be your 3 conference champions. Moon and Penn Trafford are in. Upper St. Clair will get in. So then, and this is why I said 5 teams from the Allegheny 6 are going to get in, right? You got 3 wild cards. Look at these records of some of these teams. Like Bethel Park and South Fayette are absolutely going to get wild card spots. Like there's no doubt in my mind that even a 6 and 4
Sure.
Bethel team or a 5 and 5 South Fayette team is going to get overpassed by one of these teams with losing
No,
records.
I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. So Upper St. Clair, Bethel Park, South Fayette should all feel pretty good about their playoff chances. So then it really comes down to who finishes 3rd in the Big East and gets that last guaranteed spot between Kiski and Gateway, who finishes 4th between potentially Gateway and Armstrong, and then what happens in the Northeast between Shaler, North Hills, Penn Hills. 2 of those 3 will get in. But if Plum upsets Penn Hills, Plum is not out of it by any means yet, because like we said, they've got wins over Kiski and Gateway. So a new feature on the WPIAL Blitz show. Let's talk some bracketology.
Bracketology, baby.
Yes. So this is, we still have a week to play, but kind of just looking at the picture as I see it right now, right? Pine Richland's only loss this year was to Central Catholic. They are the defending champions. So the WPIAL has traditionally put the defending champions in the number 1 seed spot if they, win their conference. So I feel pretty good about Pine Richland as the number 1 seed and putting undefeated Peters Township, who was the runners up last year, in the number 2 seed spot. And then the other conference champion, Woodland Hills, as the number 3 seed. Now, 1 more bye left to go. I think it comes down to Moon and Penn Trafford. Penn Trafford beat Moon by 1 point this year in a non-conference game. So with Penn Trafford's head-to-head victory, I think that puts Penn Trafford in the number 4 spot and Moon in the number 5 spot. And now we're in an interesting situation as far as the overall bracket goes, right? Because you've got 5 teams from the Allegheny 6 conference that all have winning records and better records than the other teams that are in, right? So because the WPIAL tries to avoid conference rematches in the first round, I think the easiest thing to do is to just slot all those teams in, with Upper St. Clair going to the 6 seed, Bethel to the 7, and South Fayette to the 8. And then you can just kind of fill in the other teams. I would put Kiski at 9 just because they have a few more wins. And also by putting Kiski at 9, or Kiski or kind of whoever finishes in that third place spot in the Big East. Then the whatever happens with the chaos of the Northeast Conference, North Hills or whoever finishes second, Shaler or Penn Hills or whoever finishes third, and then whoever the final wild card is to the 12 seed. I think that gives you a pretty neat playoff bracket. So I would anticipate seeing something very similar to this. This kind of contains, doesn't leave a lot of room for contingencies because, second place from the Northeast, third place from the Northeast, whatever it is, those teams can just slot in and you don't have to worry about a conference rematch somewhere in there.
And clearly, I think you just aptly pointed out, really this 5A is going to go through those four teams with the buys. I mean, let's be real about that. Those teams have pretty much distinguished themselves. It's hard for me to imagine any second round upsets or quarterfinal upset in that. I mean, just by looking at this,
Well,
I just maybe Upper St. Clair over Woodland Hills. Okay, all right, would be the only one. But beyond that, I think that's pretty solid with the four teams that you've got with the first round bye.
yeah, the only other one I'll throw out there, and just because I've been on their bandwagon all year, is that Moon only lost by 1 point to Penn Trafford, and that was a fourth quarter comeback that Penn Trafford had. So I think if they play again, Moon might have a shot at Penn Trafford. So I wouldn't be shocked if it winds up like this. I would not be shocked if Moon upset Penn Trafford, but that's a 4-5 game. So, those teams are pretty tight
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah,
It's
good
it's hard
stuff,
to call a
Ian.
5 seed being a 4 seed a huge upset, right? Like
Yeah, right.
it's a
No,
it's a slight
I'm just
upset.
saying, right. I wouldn't. It's a however it falls, I think anything can happen in that first round. I think the second round here, as we talk, maybe Upper St. Clair could get past Woodland Hills, but I think it's pretty solidly in the court of those four teams that have first round buys.
I would agree, and I would also say that really 5A is going to run through those top two seeds. It's
Yeah,
Pine Richland and Peters Township, in another potential rematch of last year's championship game. I
yeah,
think those two are the best two.
yeah, clearly good stuff there, Ian.
All right, on to 4A, where remember only two teams are guaranteed playoff spots plus two wild cards. So the field gets very tight here very quickly. In the Big Six Conference, Trinity clinched their first conference title since the year I was born, 1986. And Thomas Jefferson also locked up a playoff spot, 31st straight year that TJ is in the playoffs. Chartiers Valley, who lost to TJ, is going to have to make sure they beat Ringgold this week if they want to have a chance at potentially getting one of those wild card spots. In the Greater Allegheny Conference, McKeesport scored a school record 76 points in their win over Indiana. Mars also clinched a playoff spot with a convincing win over Hampton. I don't think either West Mifflin or Hampton they play this week. I don't think whoever wins that game has a shot at a wild card. So it's pretty much McKeesport and Mars here out of the Greater Allegheny Conference. They've already
Mm-hmm.
locked up spots. Now in the Parkway, this one's gone a little crazy because West Allegheny went out and beat Newcastle 2 weeks ago. So now, and then Montour beat Aliquippa last week. So now we've got a game between Montour and West Allegheny, where remember, only the top two teams are in. So Montour West A, the winner of that game is in. Um, Newcastle can also get one of the guaranteed playoff spots. The only way Newcastle will most likely get it. The only way Newcastle does not get one of the guaranteed playoff spots is if Newcastle loses to Blackhawk, Aliquippa loses to Ambridge, and West A loses to Montour, in which case both West Allegheny and Montour would be in. But other than that extremely improbable scenario, Newcastle will get in. And all they have to do is beat Blackhawk to make sure they get in. So West A Montour winner is in, Newcastle is in, and then the other teams are going to have to hope for wild cards. And remember, There's only 2 of them to go around. So
Yeah.
top 2 from each conference, Trinity and TJ, McKeesport and Mars have their spots locked up. Currently, West Allegheny sitting in first place in the Parkway, Newcastle currently sitting in second, and then you've got 2 wild cards to go around between Chartiers Valley, the loser of West Allegheny Montour, and Aliquippa. So that's going to be a pretty tough. I think the committee is going to spend the most time on this decision of who the wild cards are from 4A.
Yeah. Clearly, yeah. Uh, you can't. You still have obviously the reputation. The reputation of Aliquippa is definitely, I think, above where they're truly at competitive wise right now. So, um,
And
it wouldn't surprise me at all if they get left out.
part of it is, I mean, truthfully honest, Aliquippa's starting quarterbacks got hurt and is out for the year with a knee injury, right? So he's
Hmm.
missed the last couple games. So whenever you lose a player as good as Marcus Council, like it's going to set your team back and it's going to be harder for you.
Sure.
So Aliquippa has struggled to score points this year and has relied on their defense a lot. But when you lose your starting quarterback halfway through the season, that can happen.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the story with Aliquippa. So let's talk bracketology. I actually have 2 different scenarios here because I think it does matter a little bit. So if Montour beats West Allegheny, um, I kind of assumed everyone else would win. So you'll notice these records kind of assume those victories. So that means that Newcastle would be the Northeast Conference champions because they have a head-to-head win over Montour. Looking at these teams, looking at these records, considering the fact that Keymon Spell is back, I think that puts McKeesport as the number 1 seed in 4A. And then Newcastle is the other conference champion. Oh, that shouldn't say Northeast. That should say Parkway. My bad. And then I would put Trinity in as the number 3 seed as the other conference champion. There could be a case to be made for Montour. Montour did beat Trinity in non-conference play, but also Mars beat Montour. So whenever you get a lot of teams just beating each other, I think they'll just revert to the fact that Trinity was a conference champion and put Trinity at the 3 seed. I'd put Thomas Jefferson as the 4 seed defending champion, still 8-2 overall, even though they have a couple losses. But I think having Trinity 3, TJ 4 probably does make some sense.
Yeah, but but you have to look at the fact too that you know why wouldn't you? Unfortunately, why wouldn't you put him at 6? Only because
Well, you wouldn't put him at 6 to avoid the conference rematch with
well,
Trinity.
but my point is that McKeesport being the number 1 seed, let's just say the other bracket should have maybe the other stronger teams, or Thomas Jefferson would be in with Trinity and Newcastle rather than McKeesport.
Fair. Yeah, I think they I think because teams get home games in the first round of the playoffs, I think the WPIAL is probably based on their past trends going to try and get the 4 best teams in the top 4 seeds and then let everything else kind of sort itself
See,
out. So
if it were me and if I was the committee, Thomas Jefferson and Mars go to the bottom bracket, and the other 3 teams go to the top.
go to the
Just
top.
because McKee's part is the number 1 seed, they should have the easiest road to the championship.
That's fair. Um, Although I think last year TJ was the number 1 seed and Aliquippa was the number 4 seed. So,
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah,
do
that's right. I
yeah.
get it. Yeah,
Yep.
but the records were, yeah, I guess comparable. So
Yeah.
I buy what you're selling.
Yep. So then Montour is the number 2 team out of the Parkway Conference, not Northeast. I'm sorry, I got it. Copy paste error on my slides. So I'd slot Montour as the number 5 seed. Also because now that I have 9 teams listed here because they're the ones in the running, but because you're going to have probably multiple wild cards out of the Parkway Conference, you want to make sure you don't rematch them with Newcastle. So then, to me, that would slot Mars against Trinity, and then you're looking at either Chartiers Valley, Aliquippa, or West Allegheny. So in this case, Aliquippa beat West Allegheny, so Aliquippa gets an advantage from me, but Aliquippa can't conference rematch against, or the WPIAL doesn't like conference rematches. So I think the WPIAL in that case would put Aliquippa as the 8 seed instead of the 7 to avoid the conference rematch with Newcastle. Now, thinking back to very early in the season, Chartiers Valley came from behind and beat West Allegheny in non-conference play. So to me, in this case where West Allegheny loses to Montour, they go from first place in the Parkway Conference to out of the playoffs because West A lost head-to-head to both Aliquippa and Char Valley. And to me, if that's your decision for your wild cards, Aliquippa, Char Valley, West Allegheny, you've got head-to-head results that say West Allegheny lost to both of those other teams. So I would put those other 2 teams in over West A. And then, just avoid the conference rematches by putting Char Valley 7 and Aliquippa 8.
Well, what creates kind of the conundrum here is the fact that you have so many of the wild card teams with better records than the conference champions. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what
Yeah.
makes it look kind of askew. So,
Right. Right. Well, and Trinity being a conference champion, like they beat Thomas Jefferson. They played a brutally tough non-conference schedule that made them,
sure.
start off pretty rough. I mean, they played Moon, who we talked about in 5A. They lost him on tour, but they played Peters Township and they played Bethel Park. So, I mean, Trinity
Yeah.
lost to three of Trinity's losses were to teams that are going to be in the 5A playoffs. So I think, we can cut them a little slack.
Well, it
McKeesport's
doesn't matter.
losses,
They're going in as conference champions. So
right.
it's kind of moot. It's just like how it's all going
Yeah.
to play out with the wild card teams and how how they're going to be seated by the committee.
Yep. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the other scenario, if West Allegheny beats Montour and then is the Parkway Conference champion, I still think McKeesport's the number 1 seed. In this case, I do think they'd probably put West Allegheny at 2 just because they are the conference champions. Trinity at 3 once again. In this case, I moved Newcastle to 4 just because they would be they'd be a tied conference champion with West Allegheny. Maybe you put them at 3 instead, could go either way. In this case, I'd slot TJ at 5, and then Montour at 6 with the head-to-head win over Aliquippa, also avoiding the Montour West Allegheny rematch. So that moves Mars down to the 7 seed. And then a decision, and this I think becomes the real hard one for the committee, right? Aliquippa or Chartiers Valley for the last wild card spot if West Allegheny beats Montour. And I think that's the really tough one. Personally, I think I would still give it to Aliquippa, just for lots of reasons, but Aliquippa's played a bunch of close, tight games. Char Valley just got destroyed by Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
So I think Aliquippa played a much harder schedule also than Chartiers Valley did. Some of Chartiers Valley's early season games, right? Like they beat Baldwin, they beat Indiana. Baldwin's winless. Indiana's got only 2 wins. So I think Aliquippa on strength of schedule then would get in as the last team. But I think that's going to be a much harder discussion for the committee. This is just my thoughts, my
Uh,
kind of,
I don't think it much. I'll be
hypothesize.
honest with you. I don't think it much matters whether it's Chartiers Valley or Aliquippa in there because they're not beating McKeesport.
Mm,
I mean, it doesn't matter who the team is. So,
yeah.
and you have to believe that they're the last ones that are going to get in. And I think we're both pretty confident that McKeesport's going to come in at the number 1 seed. So it doesn't really much matter. I know that we like to make arguments about it, but I think that McKeesport is solid at the number 1 seed, but then everything else is a crapshoot. You just gave us 2 different scenarios there that quickly between 2, 3, and 4, and that. But the only I think constant going through this 4A bracket is going to be McKeesport.
Yeah. And the other thing I will say is if the bracket winds up like this, um, I I would really like an upset favor, an upset chance coming out of the bottom half, whether it be Mars or Montour.
Oh, sure.
I think one of those teams, like Coach
It's an
Casper at
upset
Mars.
in name only because they're both very good teams.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's the thing with this 4A playoff field, right? With only 8 teams, it's so limited that you're going to have good teams knocked out in the first round. Like these are all very good teams, even the teams that
Hmm.
are seeded 6,
Sure.
7, 8, right? They're all very good teams.
Yep.
A lot of it, I think, with seeding the bottom half of the bracket is just trying to avoid those conference rematches more so than what a team's quote unquote true seed might be.
Right. Right.
But the one thing I will say, why I do think that last spot potentially matters, is Aliquippa and Thomas Jefferson are currently tied for the longest active playoff qualification streak. They both last missed the playoffs in 1994. So if Aliquippa gets left out of the playoffs, that's going to end a 30-year streak of making the playoffs for Aliquippa. So I think because
Well,
I'm a
you know
guy who
what?
likes history
They
and
didn't
likes
look.
streaks.
They allowed other factors to make the determination.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
they're the ones that whose performance on the field is allowing the committee to determine their fate. So they've got nothing to really argue about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anytime you leave something up to a selection committee, right? It's like the NCAA tournament. You have a chance to win your way in. If you didn't do it, then you're taking your chances. All right, so
That's
let's
right.
talk 3A here. In the Allegheny 7 conference, the 3 guaranteed playoff spots are wrapped up between Amani Christian, Highlands, and Freeport. If Freeport beats Amani Christian this week, they have a chance to win the conference title. Amani can win the conference title with a win over Freeport. Because of the potential for a 3-way tie with Highlands. If Highlands wins over Valley, who they should beat, then Freeport has to beat Amani by 6 points or more if they want to win the conference title outright, other than a shared title.
You really think that Highlands is going to beat them on?
No, 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 no. Highlands is
Oh,
playing Valley. Freeport
okay.
is playing
Okay.
Amani.
All
But
right. Excuse me.
yeah,
Freeport.
yeah. Probably not. No.
All
But
right.
I'm just saying that Freeport could win the conference title if they beat Amani by 6 points or more. Um, Valley and
That's a
Highlands
fact.
battle for
That's
the
the
bridge.
fact, Jack.
Fun rivalry. Burrell, even though they're sitting at 3-6, not out of the wild card race, which I will talk about a little bit later. All right, Interstate Conference. Elizabeth Forward beat Southmoreland last week, wrapped up the conference title. Southmoreland is also in the playoffs. Derry got that big win over Mount Pleasant. So Derry now sitting in third place, the last guaranteed spot. Derry is in with a win over York or a Mount Pleasant loss, and Mount Pleasant's playing Elizabeth Forward. So most likely Derry in, Mount Pleasant hoping on a wild card. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
Western Hills Conference. I think this conference is getting 5 teams into the postseason. Avonworth Conference champion, Central Valley second place.
Sure looks that way.
North Catholic playing Hopewell this week. So for the third guaranteed playoff spot, Beavers in with a improbable win over Avonworth and a North Catholic loss. If Beaver loses, which I assume they will because they're playing Avonworth, then North Catholic is in with a win or a loss by less than 5 points. Hopewell needs to win by 6 or more to get one of the guaranteed playoff spots. But either way, I think whichever two don't get a guaranteed spot between North Catholic, Beaver, and Hopewell will get in as wild cards. So looking at the big picture, the 3 guaranteed spots in the Allegheny 7 are wrapped up. 2 of the 3 are wrapped up in the Interstate. Derry most likely getting the third one. In the Western Hills, Avonworth, Central Valley have their spots wrapped up. And then third place between North Catholic, Burrell, and Hopewell. But I think, North Catholic, Beaver, and Hopewell. Misspoke there. North Catholic, Beaver, and Hopewell. I think all 3 get in. 2 of them will get wild cards. Now, the final wild card between Burrell and Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant has a better record, but Burrell actually beat them head to head earlier this year in non-conference play. So
yeah, but that doesn't matter in wild cards. Okay,
it
that's up to
doesn't.
the committee.
It's up
No,
to
no,
the.
no, that's up to the committee.
It's up to the
No, no, no.
committee.
Those wild cards you talked about
Yeah,
only determine conference champions. Okay,
correct.
they don't determine the wild cards.
They
So
don't,
it's
but I
up.
think. But
Yeah,
I think
right.
the.
I guess I'm just saying
Yeah.
that means that win doesn't mean necessarily, you know, I I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if the committee, even though if Mount Pleasant has a better record than Burrell, that they would pick Burrell because of a head-to-head win. I'd be shocked at that.
I think they would. Um,
I wouldn't put it past anybody, but that just goes against it. Okay, that's just like it's just like saying a team is like 2-5. Two of their wins happen to be against that team, that they're up against, but that other team is like only got like maybe two losses, and you're going to take the other team. I don't buy that.
well,
Let's move.
I will say I like the I like the chances of Burrow with the head-to-head win over Mount Pleasant. I think,
Even if Mount Pleasant has a better record, you're
yeah,
kidding me. There's
yeah,
no way. There's
yeah,
no way. Look, I'm here. We're gonna have to figure out something to
yeah.
wager here.
Well, here's the other thing though,
We're
right?
not a betting show.
Mount Pleasant has a better record right now, right? But Mount Pleasant's playing Elizabeth Forward this week. So Mount
Okay.
Pleasant probably loses that game. Burrow is playing Deer Lakes, who's only 2-7. So if Burrow beats Deer Lakes, then they're 4-6, and Mount Pleasant would also be 4-6.
All
So then
right.
they'd have the
But
same
no, that's
record.
not what we were talking about. We were talking about the fact that there's no way they're going to pick the team that has pick Burrell if their record is worse than Mount Pleasant.
Eh,
So
I don't
they
know.
may, if they have the same record, well, they better take Burrow because they beat them head to head. So, all right, let's move
I
on.
think there's a chance that I think there's a chance they could take it. All
All
right.
right.
So let's talk some bracketology here. I think this one there is some room for debate. Not at the top. Avonworth defending champions, #1 seed. That's easy. Amani Christian undefeated conference champions, #2 seed, also easy. Elizabeth Forward 8-1, uh, #3 seed, also an easy choice. Now #4 seed, I think there could be some debate here.
How
Um,
about Burrow?
no, not Burl. Um, I think they'll give it to Central Valley because last year when they seeded the playoffs, they did give teams the benefit of the doubt that played really tough non-conference schedules. So I think looking at the second place teams, Central Valley played a very
All
hard
right.
non-conference schedule. Southmoreland played a very easy one. Highlands was kind of in the middle. So I think
Did any team with a better record than Central Valley beat Central Valley?
no.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Well, then,
not in 3A. All Central Valley's losses.
okay. No, well, yeah,
Yeah,
right. That was actually, you're right. That was my question because you
yeah,
can't make them the #4 seed if any of the other teams with a better record. Uh,
right,
you can't do that. I
right. No,
mean,
Central Valley's losses were Avonworth,
yeah, sure.
Montour, Thomas Jefferson, and Bell Vernon.
Okay.
So you can't dock them for
So that
losing to
right.
those
So their wins are all
4A
in
teams.
3A. Okay.
Yep. So putting Central Valley fourth then puts you in a position where with three
I
other
honestly
teams.
don't see how you look. I don't see how you can't put Southmoreland as the #4 seed. I just don't see it. I mean, even though they got waxed last week, but I just don't see how you can not put Southmoreland as the #4 seed.
Well, I have them as my #5 seed
Okay, all right. Well,
because the WPIAL has done this before with conference champions, where they gave a second place team a bye that they thought was a better team over a conference champion. Now, granted, these are two second place teams who were debating between fourth and fifth. But I think Southmoreland only one loss. I think that does carry the day over Highlands, another second place team. Highlands has been very good, but I think that does potentially carry the day of being just a one-loss team. If North Catholic beats Hopewell, I think North Catholic probably gets the #6 seed, and then Highlands at #7, and then Freeport having the best record of the remaining teams at #8. Now, here's where I think it could get interesting because I think Highlands and Freeport will play Beaver and Hopewell in some arrangement. Now, North
I
Catholic,
honestly, like I said, I
yeah,
honestly don't believe that in the top bracket you can have Freeport and Southmoreland going up. I mean, the Avonworth should have the easiest route to get to the championship. I think that
Yeah.
Freeport and unless Southmoreland is the number 4 seed, then I think that they would put them in the bottom bracket. But that's just me. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's all right.
Well,
I don't want
and
to have you redraw the map of the United States.
yeah, well, and Freeport's probably going to lose to Amani Christian, so they'll drop to 7-3. Like these are their current records, not the
Yeah,
projected
okay.
records as of next week. But you know, Beaver beat Hopewell by 1 point earlier this year, so I guess that would give them a higher spot in the standings, a slight advantage. But I think Freeport, Beaver, Highlands, Hopewell are all going to wind up playing each other, which does wind up with a very nice North Catholic against Derry matchup. Both those teams were named the Trojans. You can call it the Trojan War if you want to, even though technically it was the Achaeans against the Trojans, but nevertheless, uh, or the Athenians. But North Catholic against Derry, two teams named the Trojans. Prevents the conference rematch, and then Borough with their head-to-head win over Mount Pleasant getting in as the last wild card, potentially facing Southmoreland, works out quite well. Still some opportunity for things to change. I wouldn't be shocked if it gets seeded differently, but I think the top three are the best teams here.
Yeah.
And
There's no
really,
question about that.
yeah, really, I think it's Avonworth and Amani's, road to lose to the championship
Yeah,
game.
I totally agree. We were arguing about facts that aren't going to matter because nobody is beating the final is Avonworth and Imani. So it doesn't matter how the deck got shuffled everywhere else.
Yeah, yeah. All right, on to 2A, where South Allegheny, Apollo Ridge, Steel Valley have all clinched playoff spots. South Allegheny can win the conference title outright for the first time since 1986 with a win over Steel Valley this week. A Steel Valley win would send it into a three-way tie scenario potentially with Apollo Ridge. So if there is a three-way tie, then Steel Valley has to win by 7 or more to be the technical conference champion is the top spot. So one of the interesting things the WPIAL does in a three-way tie scenario for a conference title, all of the teams would get co-champion trophies. So they kind of ignore their tiebreakers. I'm like, oh, you were all co-champions. You're all, but nevertheless, when I'm making a standings page, I have to organize them in order of the tiebreakers. Um, so if South Allegheny loses by less than 6, they would still be conference champions. But the top 3 are all in here. Ulsh has a shot at a wild card, and actually is a big game this week against Keystone Oaks, which has some big seeding implications. Century Conference, probably the game of the week here. Washington against Seton LaSalle for the
Yeah.
conference title. I mean,
All of a
two 8 and
sudden
1
that one
teams.
snuck up on us, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, Washington has been great all year. Their only loss was to Steel Valley. Seton LaSalle's only loss was to North Catholic, who's a very good 3A team. So, two 8 and 1 teams, undefeated in conference play, battling for the conference title the last week of the year. Like, that's a premier matchup that you want to see. So, Keystone Oaks also in the playoffs, but just got throttled by Seton last week. They play Ulsh this week, which I think has playoff seeding implications. All right, Midwestern Conference. This one's a mess. So Western Beavers clinched the conference title. For the 3 guaranteed playoff spots, they're one of them. And then you've got Elwood City, Riverside, Beaver Falls all sitting at 4 and 2. And a Mohawk team that was down in the dumps just a few weeks ago has now knocked off Western Beaver and Freedom to get back to 3 and 3 and put themselves in position to potentially maybe make the playoffs. So now we've got head-to-head matchups here. Elwood City against Beaver Falls, Riverside against Mohawk. The Elwood City Beaver Falls winner is in. Elwood City's also in if Riverside loses to Mohawk. And then Mohawk is in if they win and Beaver Falls loses. Riverside's in with a win. So pretty much, winning you're in here for Elwood City, Riverside, Beaver Falls, Mohawk. I guess Beaver Falls could win and not make it on a 3-way tie, but nevertheless, winning you're in basically. Winning you're in for any of these teams in that tie. So now looking at the wild card picture, there's 4 wild cards to go around, so there's a lot of them. The other team I should have mentioned is New Brighton. They're sitting down at the bottom of the conference here with a 2-4 conference record. But Freedom right above them plays Western Beaver this week. So Freedom will probably lose. New Brighton plays winless Union. So New Brighton probably wins, which gets them back up a little higher in the pack. They're 5-4 and beat both Elwood City and Mohawk. So New Brighton's got some good wins. And some close losses down there in the bottom. So potentially a team that's not quite out of the wild card conversation just yet. Top three from each conference get in. The first two conferences are all set. In the Midwestern, we've said Elwood City Beaver Falls winner gets in. Riverside Mohawk winner most likely gets in. So, two of those teams are definitely getting in. I think two of them probably get wild cards. I think Ulsh is in line for a wild card. And then you're looking at New Brighton, South Park, probably not Waynesburg, but maybe, for that last final wild card spot. So kind of weird saying like, South Park, the defending WPIAL champions, there's
Yeah.
the hope they can get a wild card, but things have kind of fallen apart for them the
I was
second
gonna
half of the year.
say that started out great and then wow.
So let's talk bracketology here. I think this is an easy choice that South Allegheny is the only undefeated team, is the number one overall seed. Washington, Seton, LaSalle, we said they're playing. So the winner, I think that's the number 2 seed. And then Western Beaver is your other conference champion. I think it's the number 3 seed, another first round bye. The Washington, Seton, LaSalle loser then goes to the number 4 seed. I mean, that just seems pretty easy from a bracketing perspective for me. And then things start to get a little complicated. I'd put Apollo Ridge 5th and then Steel Valley 6th, just because Steel Valley does have that win over Washington. They've played pretty well this year, even though they did lose to Apollo Ridge. I'm kind of assuming that South Allegheny beats Steel Valley here. But if South Allegheny loses, I think the Washington Seton LaSalle winner gets the number 1 overall seed.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think South A, I think would still get one of the 3 buys, but I think the Washington Seton winner gets the number 1 seed then. So then now you're looking at like 7 and 8, who goes in there? I think Elwood City or who,
Just a big mosh pit, really.
Elwood City or whoever finishes
Everybody's 4 and
second
5
in the Midwestern, and then Riverside or whoever finishes third. And then I think Ulsh plays Keystone Oaks this week in a non-conference game. So I think the easy choice here becomes the Ulsh KO winner goes to the number 9 seed, and the Ulsh KO loser, to prevent a conference rematch, goes to the number 10 seed. And then whoever's 4th in the Midwestern Conference between Beaver Falls, Mohawk, potentially New Brighton, if they were to work their way up, gets the 11. 5th place in the Midwestern gets the 12. And then whoever the last wild card is between like New Brighton or Waynesburg or somebody, South Park, I don't know, gets the last spot. But you
This is,
know, like we said,
it's
that
unlikely to matter.
unlikely to matter. But yeah, so yeah,
Unlikely to matter, other than as you point out all year long, to the teams that are fighting to get in, it's everything.
mhm, absolutely. So I think I know I kind of took the easy way out and didn't put actual names on that one, but I think Midwestern Conference 4th and 5th place get in, and then the 4th wild card. Oops, I can't do that. 4th wild card um, between Waynesburg, New Brighton, and South Park probably gets that last spot.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, 1A, Laurel beat Southside last week, so now has a game against Neshannock where they can lock up the conference title if Neshannock were to beat Laurel. So funny scenario here. If Neshannock beats Laurel by more than 10 and Southside beats Rochester, very likely by more than 10, we could have a perfect 3-way tie where they'd all be tied with record head-to-head Gardner points and WPIAL tiebreaker points, which I've seen happen before. But they could have a perfect 3-way tie there, which would be kind of crazy. But those 3 teams have already locked up the 3 guaranteed playoff spots. in the Black Hills Conference, this one's also locked up. Fort Cherry is the conference champion. Bishop Canevin, the number 2 team out of here. And then Chartiers Houston, with that comeback 1-point win over Cornell this past week, has locked up a playoff spot, which good for them. Who saw that one coming?
Yeah, nobody.
Yeah, yeah. So Char Houston getting that last playoff spot in the Black Hills Conference. I think Cornell and Monessen play this week, so I think the winner there definitely gets a wild card spot. The loser, it's going to be tight, but the winner, I think, definitely gets one. And finally, in the Eastern Conference, or not finally, sorry, there's one more to go. We're running on an hour and a half here. Clairton has locked up the conference title. Leechburg and Jeanette are in. Fraser has won some games here, fought their way up out of the bottom of the conference where they've been for the last few years, now potentially in line for a wild card spot after they beat Greensburg Central Catholic this past week. It was a 35-33 game. So shout out to Fraser for putting themselves in position to make the playoffs. They face winless Springdale now. Is all that stands between them and a playoffs and a wild card spot. So
yeah, good. Fraser's a really good story.
Yes, definitely. Three-way tie brewing down at the bottom between Brentwood, Riverview, Greensburg Central Catholic. That could be impactful for the wild card as well. And then in the Tri-County South, California plays Jefferson Morgan this week. If Jefferson Morgan were to beat Cal, then Bentworth would be the conference champion. California can also win the conference title just with a straight-out win over Jefferson Morgan. So Bentworth does have to beat Avella. I think they should be able to do that. Avella, their 6-3 record's a little bit deceiving. I know you really value wins, but their schedule was not very good. Like they beat,
it's still a 1A schedule, so I mean,
yeah. But I mean, like looking at who Avella beat to get to 6-3 in their non-conference schedule, like, or in their schedule overall. Okay, so they actually played Mapletown twice. They played them in week 0, and they played them in as part of conference play. So they've beaten Mapletown twice, who's at the bottom of the conference. Then in conference play, they've beaten the teams below them, right? West Green, Carmichael's, Beth Center. Okay. And then in non-conference play, in addition to Mapletown, they played Springdale, who hasn't won a game in 3 years, and they played Carlinton, who's at the bottom of a conference in 2A.
Hey, look, some teams think that that's the smart way to do it.
Well,
but remember, they're not setting the schedule. The WPIAL is. So,
true. Right. Well, and one of the reasons why the WPIAL gave them the schedules, Avella is one of the smallest schools in the WPIAL, has a tiny roster, has struggled for a long time, and they tried to give teams that had traditionally struggled like easier schedules. So you're right. The WPIAL did give them this schedule, and they went out and played it, and they beat those teams. I'm just saying that when you're looking at the wild card, right, like a 4-5 team might actually have played a tougher schedule than the 6-3 Avella team, right? So, I think so the guaranteed playoff spots in 1A are all spoken for. It's the 4 wildcard spots that are still up for grabs. I think the Monessen Cornell winner definitely gets one. I think Fraser should get one. And then it comes down to the Monessen Cornell loser, that 3-way tie in the Eastern Conference between Riverview, Greensburg Central Catholic, and Brentwood. Avella, maybe Shenango, who is 3-6. So there's going to be some difficult decisions just as you wait. Like, how much do Avella's wins mean versus strength of schedule for some of those teams in that 3-way tie? So,
the committee will have to do that deep dive then.
That is 1A is going to be tough to figure out the playoff teams. I think once they figure them out, the seeding actually becomes pretty easy. That Fort Cherry is your defending champions is the 1 seed. Clairton's your number 2 seed. Laurel's your number 3 seed, assuming they go out and beat Neshannock, which is, I did assume that. And then I think number 4, I think, goes to Bishop Canevin. I think they've been kind of the next best team overall this year. 5, I would give the 5 seed to California, the champions of assuming they win the Tri-County South. I think California has a win over Cornell in non-conference play. They've been a pretty impressive for a Tri-County South team. I think putting them at 5 works out very well. 6 can go to Southside, 7 to Leechburg, and 8 I would give to Jeanette, although you could also give it to Neshannock. I think putting Neshannock and Jeanette in that 8-9 game um, works out pretty well. I just think Jeanette played a slightly harder non-conference schedule. But either of those teams, I think, one of them is going to get a home game, I guess. But, that takes care of all your number 2 teams except the one out of the Tri-County South, which the WPIAL traditionally hasn't favored the TCS quite as much. But now looking at it, the teams you have left to seed, Chartiers Houston lost a non-conference game to Jefferson Morgan. So to me, that puts Bentworth, who beat Jefferson Morgan, and Jefferson Morgan in the bracket ahead of Chartiers Houston. But also that works out very well because then you would avoid a conference rematch for any of those teams in the first round. And now you start to get into the wild cards. Now you've got all your top 3 teams are in. So
Avella's got to be in there.
uh,
Regardless, they're still 6-3.
yeah. So I would say, Monessen and Cornell play each other this week. So I think Fraser gets in because they play Springdale. They're going to be 6-4. We've talked about them. I think that puts then the Monessen Cornell winner in as the number 14 seed. And then it goes between that 3-way tie in the Eastern Conference, the Monessen Cornell loser, and Avella for whoever the 3rd and 4th wild cards are. I don't have enough information yet to try and pick them, but I think that's kind of how the bracket's going to play out.
Really good stuff there,
But
Ian. Wow.
congratulations to whoever those last wild cards are. You get throttled by Clairton or Fort Cherry.
Yeah,
So
right. So much of the 1A, 2A, and 3A it's so top heavy.
Mhm.
So
yeah, it really is. I mean, depending on matchups, I think that you could, if a Jeanette team gets a favorable draw, like this is not a favorable draw for Jeanette having to play Fort Cherry in the second round, right? But if Jeanette,
hey, then they needed to win more games. I
yeah,
mean,
but
it's just
if if Jeanette could avoid Fort Cherry or Clairton in the second round, they're a team that could potentially make a semifinal run. Bishop Canavan's a really good team. Laurel's a really good team. Southside with their running game can give people problems. Neshannock could give people problems. But overall, I think this is Fort Cherry and Clairton, I think, destined to meet in the championship game once again.
yep.
So, I mean, upsets could happen, but I think Fort Cherry and Clairton are just better than everybody else.
All right. Great job on this, Ian.
All right. So, I love streaks and I also love teams that end long droughts. So we've talked about all these teams tonight, teams that have missed the
So why
playoffs
the
for at least
Lion?
5 years. Yeah, because they're in the hunt, right? They have a
Okay.
chance
All
to
right.
end their playoff
Okay.
droughts.
All
So
right.
teams that are in the hunt. I did the Shark earlier for Blood in the Water. We got the
Sure.
Lion for teams in the hunt. I'm bringing my A
You
game here
are.
for
You
this.
are bringing the A game. The symbolism is astounding.
Yes. So Hopewell has a shot to make the playoffs for the first time in 12 years. Riverview could end an 8-year playoff drought. Norwin Fraser could get in for the first time since 2017. Shaler, if they're lucky enough to get in out of that 3-way tie, could get in for the first time in 5 years. So best of luck to all these teams. I'd love to see you end your playoff droughts and hope you're able to get in.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yep.
second the motion.
All right. So our games of the week for week 9. A lot of these are ones may not be between teams with the best records, but ones with really heavy playoff implications. So that Mount Lebanon Norwin game in 6A where the winner gets in, the Penn Hills Plum game where Penn Hills can get in with a win. Plum could potentially get a wild card with a win, so
Yeah.
that's a big one. The Montour West Allegheny game in 4A that's going to decide pretty much everything as far as not only who makes the playoffs, but what the whole bracket looks like. Freeport Amani Christian for the conference title in 3A, and then North Catholic and Hopewell for the last guaranteed playoff spot in the Western Hills Conference. Steel Valley, South Allegheny battle for the conference title in the Allegheny Conference, and then Washington, Seton, LaSalle. Like I said, that one might be one of the just overall best games of the week for the Century Conference title. Neshannock and Laurel for the conference title in the Big Seven Conference, and then California, Jefferson, Morgan for the conference crown in the Tri-County South. And that non-conference game between Keystone Oaks and Olsh, which I think is a big one for playoff seeding, because if they both get in, which I'm assuming they do, the winner probably gets a better seed.
Yeah, clearly.
All right. Week 9 broadcast from friends of the show, the KDKA high school football game of the week this week is Moon against South Fayette. They did a fan vote, and that was the game the fans chose. So they will be broadcasting that one. And then our friends at WMBS out of Uniontown doing the Laurel Highlands Thomas Jefferson game. All right. So our rankings, little bit of a shakeup at the 5A, 6A rankings, just because of North Allegheny getting absolutely throttled by Pine Richland. So I think both of us have Pine Richland at number 2, Peters Township at 3. We both have Penn Trafford and Woodland Hills in. I went with the fact that Woodland Hills beat Penn Trafford pretty handily earlier this year. So I based mine off the head-to-head result. You like Penn Trafford only having 1 loss.
Yep.
I know you favor the teams with the better records overall. In the 4A, 3A rankings, it's just you're consistent. You like the teams with the better records.
Yeah, right.
4A, 3A rankings, we both have Avonworth and Amani at the top. I still have McKeesport as my number 3 team because I think they're going to get the number 1 seed in 4A, and with Keymon Spell back, I think they are the best team in 4A. Elizabeth forward, and then Trinity I put in also because everyone else I looked at, I was like, well, all those teams in the Parkway Conference have beat
Don't they
each
have
other.
3 losses?
Yeah, but they beat Thomas Jefferson pretty handily head to head, so I couldn't put TJ
I
in
just
ahead
am
of
asking
them.
the question.
Yeah.
Southmoreland has 1 loss.
1 loss to Elizabeth forward, yes.
Okay.
But Trinity beat TJ head to head, and I went with a 4A team over a 3A team. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then in 1A, 2A, I bumped Laurel up to my number 5 spot. I think your rankings pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah.
Western Beavers had a couple close calls the last few weeks, which made me raise my eyebrow a little bit over them. They were like pretty dominant, through the middle of the season, but then they lost by 20 to Mohawk last week, and then just beat New Brighton by only 6 this past weekend. So, 2 results that I was kind of like, ooh, like what's going on with Western Beaver here? They were averaging like over 40 points a game and now just put up 20 each of the last 2 weeks. So only beating New Brighton 20 to 14 and losing to Mohawk 40 to 20. Like, I'm a little concerned about Western Beaver. They need to be on upset alert in the playoffs.
Yeah, right. It is what it is. You kind of, time to start putting the sleepers out there.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So now it's time for Badges news from the East.
Oh, Badges news from the East here. LaSalle College won pretty convincingly this week. Harrisburg against a rival. Parkland still, I mean, just having a fine year as undefeated. St. Joe Prep really dispatched last year's state 4A champion Bonner Prendy, no problem. Roman Catholic, they won. Boy, that is just a star-studded arrangement there that, quite honestly, the WPIAL teams only would have to deal with Harrisburg prior to Cumberland Valley. So, which is interesting. A big team that's gotten hot down the stretch, who they were number 1 in 4A for a couple weeks last year and have risen to the top this year. Twin Valley, a couple of impressive wins. Northwest Lehigh, who was last year's 3A champion, still doing well. Southern Lehigh, Shamokin, and all these teams are undefeated. There was a group, I think there are 8 undefeated teams in 4A in like the Eastern draw. I mean, pretty crazy stuff, which is different from the West. I mean, everybody keeps beating up on everybody over there, and 4A just seems to be pretty good here on the eastern side. 2A, 1A, Schuylkill Haven, the team that just can put up points like a pinball machine. Southern Columbia back strong this year. Line Mountain in 1A. That's a 1A team. That team is playing in the Mid-Penn Conference against, they're the smallest team in their in their conference, yet they're going to win it. Okay, against 3A and 4A opponents, and even play a 5A team this year and won. So interesting there. Troy and Williams Valley. So, but I think the team that probably WPIAL teams need to pay the most attention to would be Line Mountain in 1A.
Yeah, that's good to know. And we'll talk about them now in
Oh,
our statewide rankings. So I think you'll hear that name again. So
okay.
starting up in 6A, where not a lot of movement, but a little bit moving around. Is my statistical formula I've said really likes those District 11 teams, mostly because they play a lot of other big schools. So Easton and Parkland getting some recognition at the top, but I think LaSalle College has been moving up the rankings this year as they've played more and more District 12 teams. So getting the respect they deserve after, the way they've started their season, playing very well right now.
Yeah, only
Harrisburg in
surprise
the
I
middle of the
see is
pack.
North Penn. Who wasn't ranked last week that kind of rose up even with with two losses.
Mm-hmm. Well, North Allegheny took that big loss and fell out of the rankings. So, yeah, any of these other 6A teams you want to comment on?
Nazareth I think is a good team. I think with two losses though, clearly Parkland I think is the one in District 11 that who District 12 and District 1 are going to have to pay attention to. Um, you know, uh, between North Penn and Penridge. The one thing about District 1 this year is that they all seem to be beating up on each other. I mean, both of the Downing towns have two losses this year, and it doesn't seem to be, that one dominant team in District 1, this year on the 6A side or even on, the 5A side, really, with the exception of Springfield Delco, who's undefeated so far. But
Yeah,
on the 5A side there, Bishop McDevitt, that's the 800-pound gorilla
right.
that is gonna be tangling with King Kong Pine Richland, as well there. So that's going to be a really interesting. McDevitt with the two losses there early in the season, and obviously Pine Richland. I think those two are just on a collision course in the state semifinal up there at Mansion Park.
Yeah, most likely, I think so. I think that uh, Peters Township, Pine Richland, definitely the best two teams in the WPIAL. I would say that I would probably personally put Pine Richland a little higher, especially after what they just did to North Allegheny. But I think, potentially just looking at the way the statewide bracket's set up, McDevitt versus probably Pine Richland in, the semifinal, and then probably facing Roman Catholic in the state championship is a pretty likely scenario, I think.
Well, those three
To
teams right in the middle, though, Conestoga Valley, Springfield, Delco, and Hollidaysburg, those are teams that have had really solid seasons that nobody's really talking about, that I think could rise up in the postseason and really make names for themselves.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. All right. And I don't know a whole lot about any of them, so I can't really speak to them, but a little bit more about the ones from the East. But I will say that in the 4A rankings, no WPIAL teams showed up. But I think that's kind of indicative of just how the WPIAL is in 4A this year, that you've got a lot of teams that have lost a lot of games. I think we both said we think McKeesport's going to be the top seed in the playoffs, but they've got three losses. All of them came without Keemon Spell in the lineup, but
Yeah.
nevertheless, it's
Yeah,
statewide.
there's no district 17 in the top 10.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, and I forgot to update the ranking numbers on 3A. Those are the numbers from last week. They're in the right order, but but yeah, so you want to talk about some of these 4A and 3A schools, just because the 3A schools, obviously Avonworth, Elizabeth Forward, Monte Christian, I'm very familiar with, but some of the other ones, we've got a North Pocono, a District 2 team in there, and
Yeah, no, and that's what I was saying, that there are a number of undefeated teams in 4A, including Shamokin, who fell out. And I don't think that they didn't lose last week that I recall. Um, and so it's really interesting how your formula is really, drawing on that. Pope John Paul II, their loss was to a much larger opponent. West York, they lost to New Oxford, it was a 5A school who hasn't lost a regular season game since I don't think 2000 since 2022. So I mean, yeah, no harm in that. Um, that's a team that I think is very good as well. On the 3A side, Northwest Lehigh, the defending champions, boy, I tell you what, they're just on a collision course with Avonworth again.
yeah, this really feels like, although I think Avonworth, if they play Amani Christian, will get a challenge there, but I think Avonworth's potential state semifinal will be easier than their WPIAL championship game against Amani Christian.
Yeah,
But I think Avonworth and Northwestern Lehigh probably are the best two teams here.
yeah, yep.
Yeah. All right, and then in 2A, we've got Southern Columbia and Schuylkill Haven staying atop the rankings. Karn City out of District 9 knocked off Punxsutawney this past week,
Yep.
who had been in the 4A rankings. So Karn City making a big jump up. And also no WPIAL teams appearing in the 2A rankings. South Allegheny fell out. And this is just, part of what my ranking takes into account is the quality of teams that you played. So South Allegheny beat a
Yeah,
really
that's why
bad
it's a
Stowe
power
Rocks team.
ranking. I mean, it's a
Right.
power ranking.
Yeah. So they beat a bad Stowe Rocks team, so that didn't help them as much in their overall ranking. But once again, no WPIAL teams in the 2A rankings. A lot of District 4, a lot of District 11. But some of those teams are going to start to knock each other off. On the
Yeah,
District
and
1
I think
side, or sorry, yeah,
that
go ahead.
Southern Columbia and Schuylkill Haven, they would meet almost in a state quarterfinal. So they would meet early on. I think the District 11 champ and the District 4 champs would play early on in the state tournament. So that's pretty interesting on the 2A side there. That could be a really monumental matchup, Southern Columbia and Schuylkill Haven.
Yeah. Yeah, that for it is kind of weird how the state brackets are set up, that you kind of play by halves of the state and district and whatnot,
Hmm.
that it's not necessarily the true like number one, number two team. They're not seeded, right? So
Correct.
you get like an Eastern champ and a Western champ, and they just kind of play each other. And
Hmm.
sometimes you get situations where, two of the best teams wind up playing in like a quarterfinal or something like that.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's just like, all the teams in, District 12 and District 1, or, and District 11, I mean, on the 6A side, are just, beating each other up to where only one comes out of there, in a state semifinal. So,
Yeah. Yep. And then in 1A, Belmont Charter out of District 12, topping the rankings. Bishop Guilfoyle, the defending state champs, out of District 6. Line Mountain, that team you were talking about, coming in third. Westinghouse out of the Pittsburgh City League. Port Allegheny, who made the state championship last year, sitting in fifth. And
yeah,
then,
that's amazing back-to-back seasons for Port Allegheny, eh?
yes, oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, without a doubt. So just some good teams here in 1A. And it is interesting, I think, that the WPIAL teams sitting at the bottom of the
Yeah,
1A rankings. But the Fort Cherry got knocked off by Port Allegheny pretty handily last year in the state semis. So
yeah.
we'll see how it goes. All right, so that pretty much wraps up tonight's show. If you've enjoyed listening to us talk for a very long time about all the scenarios in play for this week's games, you can also check me out on the Steel City Blitz podcast on Thursday nights talking about the Steelers. So thanks everyone for tuning in tonight.
Yeah, and
You've
by
obviously found us
looking at
here. Follow us
by,
on social media. Check out steelcityblitz.com for my WPIAL standings page, playoff clinching articles. Maybe I'll throw something together with some of this bracketology stuff because that was kind of unique. First time I'd ever done that as part of this show. And yeah, we'll have a full analysis of the playoff brackets once they're posted as well.
I was following along. I mean, I can see how many people, how many viewers or whatever like that. Pretty much everybody hung with us all night long. I mean,
Oh, that's great.
now kind of as we're winding it down and that, but most everybody hung with us through the whole thing here. So obviously, look, there's nobody providing the type of information that you're putting together there, Ian, and I kid with you a little bit about your playoff scenarios or whatever like that, but that's why I'm on the show for, is to be, be a little bit of a, I don't know, point counterpoint kind of, thing there as well. I mean, I am out in Reading, PA, and you're in the Western there, but I think I know enough about the WPIAL now after 6 years to be dangerous, I would say.
Oh yeah, you've got a good working knowledge of things, and you know, I I very much don't want to eliminate anyone before they're eliminated, right? And I don't want to crown anyone before they're crowned, right? Like
Sure.
there are very good teams. There are, teams that have a 99% chance of winning, right? But there's when I look at the standings overall, I try and take a pragmatic approach and say, okay, is this team truly clinched, or is this team truly eliminated? Even if it's a 99% chance you lose this game, but you could win this game. The game still has to be played, so there's a chance that a team could get in. So
Yeah,
um,
and in
yeah,
covering football too, you all look. There's always that chance, and that's why you can't not show up and cover a game because of the risk of missing the upset.
right,
And that's the thing when you put together your projections of who's in and who's out, you certainly don't want to miss the projection of the long shot making the tournament. I get that
yeah,
100%.
yep, absolutely. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I believe the playoff brackets are going to get announced on Saturday. So by the time we do this show next week, we'll have the playoff brackets. Next
Wow.
week will, be the first round of the playoffs. So we're getting down to it here. And for all the, players, coaches, kids, fans, whatever else, last week of the regular season, like just enjoy it, right? Just have fun, enjoy the ride. Whatever happens with the playoff picture, right? The committee's going to seed teams. The committee's going to pick wild cards. That's out, go out, do your best. That's out of your control, right? You can't control
Yeah.
what other people do. So all you can control is what's in front of you. Go out and win the game, and
That's right.
whatever
They had
happens,
10
happens.
weeks to control their destiny. Now, so unfortunately for some teams, somebody else has their destiny, and that's the bad part. But anyway, all
Yep.
right. For my buddy Ian, I'm Bruce Badgley. Listen, thanks for joining us on the WPIAL Blitz Show. And we'll be back for week one of the playoffs next week. Really appreciate